Hello and welcome to Newsround, the programme where we bring you up to date with the news and views around the aerospace, aviation and defence across the emerging markets of Africa, Arabia and South Asia. I'm Alan Peaford. This week in defence, we go to Bahrain and see the first of the Bell AH-1Z Viper helicopters begin its way along the production line in Texas. We talk to Neelam Mathews about the devastating impact COVID is having on India's aviation. Steve Nichols hears about a test on the next generation of connectivity from Panasonic, and there's a great report from Chloe Greenbank on how airlines and airports should be stepping up to bring an end to illegal wildlife smuggling. So get all that, plus the news headlines from Marcella Nethersole after the break.
Welcome back, and here are the news headlines. Etihad Airways CEO Tony Douglas dramatically announced at last week's World Aviation Festival that the airline is to ground its entire fleet of 10 Airbus A380s indefinitely, as well as axing its entire Boeing 777-300ER fleet. Douglas said the airline had got far too diversified when it came to fleet types to be operationally efficient, and said while the A380s are a wonderful product, they are no longer commercially sustainable. A new interim CEO has been appointed as part of the ongoing efforts to revive South African Airways. Thomas Kukokolo took up his appointment on April the 13th, taking over from Philip Saunders, who resigned in December 2020. Kukokolo's appointment makes him the fifth executive to be appointed to the position in just 5 years. The airline entered administration in December 2019. Meanwhile, reports from CH Aviation say that South Africa's previously successful low-cost carrier, Mango, has run out of cash and is now grounded as it asks for bankruptcy protection. GE Capital Aviation Services has agreed a purchase leaseback arrangement for 14 LEAP-powered Airbus Neo aircraft with India's Indigo. The 7 A320neo and the 7 A321neo are scheduled to be delivered between the fourth quarter of 2021 and the middle of 2022. It is also believed to be converting 4 A321 Classic aircraft into full freighter configuration. Egypt Air and Sudan Airways have signed a strategic partnership MOU. The partnership will enhance opportunities for trade exchange and activate aviation within the Egyptian government plan to support bilateral relations between the two countries. The MOU includes Egyptians training Sudan Airlines pilots and cabin crews, as well as participating in modernising Sudanese fleet of aircraft and developing the country's MRO capabilities. Also in Egypt, Air Cairo has taken delivery of its first A320neo aircraft. The new aircraft will join Air Cairo's all-Airbus fleet of 7 aircraft. Gulf Air has extended its strategy of teaming with neighbours this week as it signed a wide-reaching agreement with Saudia. These are among the oldest of the airlines in the region and will be starting the alliance with code shares between Bahrain and many Saudi domestic airports. Etihad Airways has operated its first eco-flight for 2021 on its signature Greenliner aircraft, which is fully offset for all operations through this year as part of the airline's mission toward carbon-neutral flying. It is the fourth eco-flight so far and flew to Rome, testing a range of flight and engine initiatives, as well as onboard product enhancements to reduce weight and single-use plastics, with successful trials to be incorporated into regular scheduled operations. It was International Pilots' Day on Monday, and global consulting firm Oliver Wyman took the opportunity to warn Middle Eastern airlines that they were facing a pilot crisis unless they began acting now to ensure they are ready for the uplift of flights over the next 3 years. International travel restrictions from India are now growing by the day as the COVID situation worsens in the country. The UAE has now barred entry of travellers from India for 10 days, which started on the 25th of April and will end on the 5th of May. Indians can arrive into the UAE even as transit passengers, only if they have stayed in some of the other countries for at least 14 days during this period. Etihad Airways has said the restriction period may be extended. Well, it's certainly looking very grim over there, Alan.
You're right, it really is terrible, Ella. Well, we're going to go straight to our correspondent in New Delhi, Neelam Mathews. And Neelam, You know, it must be pretty awful there at the moment. Huge country, huge population, and COVID really sweeping through. Country that's producing a lot of vaccines that are going elsewhere in the world. But I guess you've got a lot of logistical issues for the aviation industry as well. What's happening?
It's terrible here, though there are some rays of hope. For instance, nobody would have imagined, Alan, that the fledgling air cargo business would be so much in demand. The country has a single cargo airline called Blue Dart with 6 757 freighters. Today, there's a 200% increase in cargo capacity, and it's growing, even as passenger planes are being converted to freighters. Budget airline SpiceJet has 19 freighters and 5 wet leased wide bodies that will also be flying to the US and UK. And Indigo, the largest carrier, has become the market leader in cargo and has already ordered 6 321 classics, which the last of which will be delivered in 2023. Air India is doing a great job too.
Great, because we've seen UK and the US sending in medical supplies, really, because although you produce all the vaccines, there's a shortage of certain elements of it, isn't there? So I guess the airports have got to be on the ball and working as well. Yeah,
the Air Force is, as usual in disaster management in India in crisis, always a godsend. And the Air Force, for instance, has been ferrying on its C-17s empty oxygen tankers to places that have factories producing oxygen. They have also flown in cryogenic containers from Singapore.
Great. So it's getting on, it's getting done, and you know, we wish you all the very best with it and for the industry, because we know as well the impact of India stopping in the way that it has to at the moment is going to have a massive impact on other parts of the world, including the Middle East, I know. So I think also your Africa business is beginning to work, isn't it? Hasn't Astral now started their flights?
Yes, they have, and they have flown to Yemen. And not only Astral, there are Air India's going. SpiceJet's just got stuff from Hong Kong, for instance. So there are things happening a lot over here. And yes, a lot also coming in from Africa and the Gulf countries, which we're very grateful for.
Well, thank you, Neelam, and we wish you all the very best and stay safe.
Thank you for your concern, Alan.
Well, in Africa, even COVID has not put a halt to one of the most heinous of crimes, animal trafficking. Our airports editor, Chloe Greenbank, has been looking at the problem and talking to the people who are fighting the crime. Chloe.
Hello and thank you. Yes, so the global trade in illicit wildlife is thought to be worth anywhere up to $23 billion per annum, and transnational criminal gangs are known to exploit the increasingly interconnected air transport network to traffic their illegal flora and fauna, which often originates from destinations across Africa and Asia. Now, a new report out, Shared Skies, by the Centre for Advanced Defence Studies, has found that insights into wildlife trafficking within the air transport sector can be leveraged to address other forms of smuggling, such as the illicit trade of drugs and weapons. The report also suggests a framework for airports and airlines to use to disrupt these criminal activities and put a stop to trafficking of various kinds. I spoke to Ben Spevak, the lead author of the Centre for Advanced Defence Studies, as well as Michelle Owens at Roots, the organisation which released the report, and Ian Cruikshank at the Transport Task Force at United for Wildlife, to gain a better understanding of just why wildlife trafficking should be treated as part of the bigger picture in transnational crime. So Ian, you're with Transport Task Force at United for Wildlife. Can you just tell me briefly about your organisation?
Yes, thank you, Chloe. United for Wildlife is an organisation that was started by the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, and with a mission of eradicating and reducing the illegal wildlife trade throughout the world. And we use a number of different ways to do that, including the Financial Task Force, which fights the financial crime around the illegal wildlife trade, and the Transport Task Force, which is made up of role players in the transport sector that actually tries to stop and intervene actions on the ground and within the transport logistics chain.
Okay, fantastic. So we often hear how the global trade in illicit wildlife is one of the most profitable illicit trade sectors, but roughly how much is it worth and which species are most at risk?
Well, it's very closely associated with other organized crimes, such as human trafficking and drug trafficking. And we estimate that it's worth, just on the illegal wildlife trade side, between $6 and $23 billion per annum. We often hear about rhino horn and pangolin scales, pangolins being the most trafficked mammal in the world, and elephant ivory. But illegal trafficking actually, it touches thousands and thousands of species around the world. And this happens through the pet trade, through illicit movement of birds and spiders and reptiles and turtles. So it's not limited to a few species, it actually affects thousands of species.
So Michelle, you're with ROOTS, which stands for Reducing Opportunities for Unlawful Transport of Endangered Species. Can you just tell me a little bit more about ROOTS' work?
Sure. So ROOTS is supported by the US government, by USAID, and it's a collaborative partnership led by Traffic, but also working with private sector, so IATA and ACI, as well as other organisations such as C4ADS and WWF. And we're working together to try and prevent wildlife trafficking within the aviation supply chain. So looking at how the legal system is abused by illicit activity and how to prevent that.
So many in the air transport sector have already stepped up in the fight against wildlife trafficking, but Africa in particular is home to many high-profile sorts and points of transit. So what are the main concerns and what can the air transport sector be doing to better address this issue?
Yeah. So there's definitely an economic concern for the loss of iconic wildlife, which can result in lost tourism revenues and demand for travel to destinations. However, it also adds to the loss of biodiversity and reduction of environmental health and creates national instability due to the involvement of armed groups. So tackling a crime is really as strong as its weakest link. And I would encourage affiliated companies, smaller airlines connected to hubs and airports to work together to understand the methods used by traffickers, be aware that suspicious actions may be an indication of wildlife trafficking, train their staff, and include wildlife trafficking within zero tolerance policies and include anti-wildlife trafficking measures and indicators within corporate strategies for biodiversity and sustainability.
And do you feel that enough is being done from a collaborative perspective between the different aviation stakeholders and authorities or law enforcement bodies to address the issue? And what else would you like to see being done?
Yeah, well, there's been a great response from airlines and airports to the problem of wildlife trafficking. I mean, it is very much a voluntary response at this point, but some of the larger companies have really taken a proactive and sustainable approach to internalise training and policies. However, there does need to be a continued collective effort with the private sector and enforcement working together to share information.
So Ben, beyond the risk of species extinction, animal welfare and environmental threats, your new report, Shared Skies, highlights the insights from wildlife trafficking in air transport can help address other forms of smuggling, such as the illicit trade of drugs and weapons.
Absolutely. So wildlife trafficking abides by the same principles as other activities in that it exploits legal systems of finance, communication, and transport, including aviation. And more precisely, these activities exploit vulnerabilities in legal systems. So things like low enforcement capacity, regulatory loopholes, insider threats. And that's important because we've seen multiple types of illicit activities can coalesce around the same vulnerabilities in a system. So between 2015 and 2019, over a third of air routes for known wildlife trafficking instances were also exploited to traffic non-wildlife illicit products. And in the same period, about 2/3 of cities with significant wildlife trafficking activity, which we defined as 5 or more known trafficking instances within the time period, also reported non-wildlife air trafficking activities. So the goal of seizure data analysis is to identify vulnerabilities in air transport infrastructure that traffickers are exploiting, and then to secure the system. And this approach applies to the whole of the aviation industry, but certainly to include Africa and Asia. And so those remediations might entail more rigorous screening protocols, additional training or personnel, or even the removal of an insider threat. So one note I'll make here is that the analysis is only as good as the seizure reporting. So detailed publicly available reporting is crucial for this type of analysis.
So with the aviation sector slowly restarting, it's clear that wildlife trafficking really should be treated as part of the bigger picture of transnational crime. And when it comes to those in the air transport sector, whether it's in Asia, Africa, or elsewhere in the world, it's really a case of if you know what to look out for, you really can make a difference. Thank you.
Well, let's hope they make some progress and that air transport does all it can to end this trade now. Meanwhile, good news for Bahrain, where the country is to become the first to receive the new Bell AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters. The first of the type began its journey along the production line this month, with VIP visitors from the Bahrain Embassy in Washington visiting Texas to witness the inauguration and to sign their names on the airframe. Well, earlier, I spoke to Bell's Global Director for Military Sales and Strategy, Joel Best, about why the current uniqueness of the 12 aircraft order could be an advantage, not just for Bahrain, but also its allies.
The Bahrainis have an aircraft now that is state of the art, not only with systems, sensors, weapon systems, but across the region, they now have, they bring some diversity to the user group. And so they're surrounded by AH-64 users. Inherently, when a fleet grounding takes place, and that happened in the not too distant past with the tension torsion straps on the Boeing AH-64 fleet, the fleet is grounded. The beauty of Bahrain having a diverse set of AH-1Zs is there will still be an attack helicopter option for collective defense along the Gulf Coast on their side, with those aircraft being able to be employed should there be a fleet-wide grounding of Apaches.
Well, you can see the whole of the interview with Joel on our Defence Monthly programme, which you can find on our website or on the Times Aerospace YouTube channel. Well, as people are returning to the skies, they could be demanding more, especially when it comes to in-flight connectivity. Now, our space and technology editor, Steve Nichols, has been looking at a recent test by Panasonic using the latest generation of their kit and letting passengers loose on the system. Steve.
Panasonic Avionics recently undertook a trial of its in-flight connectivity product with a major unnamed airline. They gave passengers unlimited Wi-Fi while in flight. The multi-month experiment was created to see how the airline could enhance its passenger relationships by providing high-quality Wi-Fi on board. I spoke with Jeff Sarve, Panasonic's Vice President of In-Flight Connectivity Services, to find out what they found out from the experiment.
Good morning, Steve. So we ran a trial to do unlimited usage of our capacity of our service on a large fleet of airplanes across a large carrier, just to demonstrate that, quite honestly, it is not simply the recurring battle of all the nonsense out there of frequency spectrum or other things. It really is about the technology of the network. It's about the technology of the satellites and what it can or can't deliver to the airplane. And so we worked with a large carrier who was able to help us lay that out and turn it on, promote it a little bit to their passengers while they're on the plane. It was still a paid service, still the same as the paid service they would have gotten on any other plane. But when they were on, they could do, and the passenger could do whatever they wished and go wherever they wanted to go.
And what were the results then? What did they actually use it for?
You know, nothing too surprising, right? You saw them go in and do exactly what they would have been doing before. And as you would have expected, the minute that they figured out that they could stream, they went to streaming, just like you do on your internet at home. And you know, as the news channels, or the news pages, excuse me, and everybody else adds more and more video, you become more interactive with video that way, and you stream more and more. So it was a great success for us. It demonstrated the strength of the system.
And what have What have you learned from the exercise then? What will you change going forward?
What we as a company learned from the exercise is really it's all about the setup and helping the airline determine what it is they want to deliver to their passengers, and how they want to deliver it. The speed of the network, the technology behind that drives that, right, can go anywhere from just messaging through streaming to all the passengers that you wish. It really depends on how you want to set up the airplane and candidly the business model under which you would you'd want to pay for that.
Well, thanks, Jeff, and let's hope we hear more about in-flight connectivity in the future. And now back to the studio.
Thanks, Steve. Well, I sure hope it works. Well, one thing that certainly is working is the new Bahrain airport terminal building. I had the chance to visit and meet the people behind the vision, and I tell you, it's an incredible place to go. They call it a destination on the way to the destination, but if you go to our website and have a look at the YouTube channel, you can see our mini documentary that takes you inside the terminal, and we hear in detail from the Transport and Telecommunications Minister, Kamal bin Ahmed Mohammed. Well worth watching. And finally, you will have seen from the short ads on these programmes from our sponsor, the World Defence Show, which takes place in Riyadh in March next year. Well, this week, the organisers announced that they've started phase 2 of the construction of the 800,000 square metre venue near Riyadh. It's featuring the world's first purpose-built runway for a defence event. More than 1 million tonnes of earth have been processed in the first week of works in preparation for the construction of the flagship's events, exhibition halls, access roads and car parking areas. Remember, the show's going to host more than 800 exhibitors, including 100 local defence companies, with a series of senior military delegations and officials set to attend the 4-day event from March the 6th to the 9th next year. Get that date in your diaries now. Well, that's it from Marcella and me. Until the next time, stay safe and thanks for watching. Goodbye.